The Pittsburgh Steelers were first in running jet sweeps, with 10% of their rushing plays being jet
Fucking
sweeps.
Canada.
That's the Matt Canada special.
Mhm.
RPOs and jet
Dumb.
sweeps.
Yep.
Dumb. You had to bring up the word sweep.
Jet sweeps.
And
Oh,
not
Lord. It's like
only
we're
were
back
they-
in middle school again.
Alrighty, welcome everybody to my Pittsburgh Steelers team preview here on the Miller Football YouTube channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football. And today I am joined by two very special guests to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, what happened during their season last year, what happened during the offseason, and what our expectations are for the next year. And as you can see, I've got UrinatingTree to my right, the man, the myth, the legend, and then of course Alex from Hail Mary Sports down below me. So before we get rolling here, fellas, how are we doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. It's a little rainy, miserable, very humid outside, so it's like sticky. But that's Pittsburgh weather for you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to get this done. Great getting to talk football with two people that I definitely respect very highly. And Alex, how are you doing today?
It's great, man. It's always a fun day to talk football. And unfortunately, I am also in the middle of a heat and moisture wave here in Texas. So I feel your pain.
We'll go ahead and jump into this, starting off with Pittsburgh's season last year. Obviously, because this is a team led by Mike Tomlin, they finished right around 500 with a 9-8 record, ended up third in the AFC North, 4-4 at home, 5-4 on the road, 4-1 in their last five. And that last point right there, 4-1 in their last five games, I feel like was pretty vindictive, of the Pittsburgh Steelers season last year, because there was a big improvement in the second half of the year from mainly the offense, but the team as a whole. So my first question for you guys is, what do you think was the big X factor? What do you think was the main reason for that big change in the back half of the year?
I would say part of the biggest reasons were two reasons. You saw Najee Harris run with more confidence. You had Jalen Warren emerge as a second running back. And Kenny Pickett really started to limit the turnovers. I think that helped out a bit. I'm not a big fan of Matt Canada. I think they should have let him go, but I think the reason why was because you did see improvements in the offense, but I think that was more in spite of what the offensive coordinator was. My thing, too, is that with Pickett, he's probably going to be the biggest issue or factor in towards any success or failure this next coming year. Because the one thing is you did see him reach at least his floor, and his floor is like Alex Smith or like low-end Ryan Tannehill. But if he can get to something like a Derek Carr or like a high-end Ryan Tannehill or something along those lines, I think you could hit 11, 12 wins. But that is, once again, relying on Pickett, more or less.
That's fair. Obviously Kenny was coming into the NFL. This is his first game as a Steeler, in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're having the game starts speeding up instantly, but as time progresses, the game starts slowing down, and you got to see him get more cohesion with the offense. And then you talked about Najee Harris running with a lot more confidence. That's really key in order to be able to take that pressure off Kenny, allow the game to slow down. And I feel like once Chase Claypool was gone, it was just more of a focus on what they had, the strengths, rather than there was also no really competing identities there. There wasn't competing egos. And I think it was just overall just a much more fluid team. And we all know Mike Tomlin will sell his left insert, whatever body part you want to insert, for over 500 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew damn well as soon as we were looking sub 500, I was like, we're going to make it out. We're going to turn around.
Yeah. Well, it's a curse if you want to think about it, because you can't really tank.
I know. Especially since I heard the news about Jalen Carter potentially with our trade up, and then you see the Bears trading that number 9 pick.
Mm-hmm.
It was. Oh, yeah. No, you should have seen my live reaction. I jumped out of my seat when I saw the pick was traded, and my heart sunk. But we ended up kicking ass anyway. That's okay. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, y'all got a defensive tackle that, I was a huge fan of, and Keanu Benton. And like you said, We'll talk about him here in a little bit. I should say, if it's not apparent from my hat, I am a Bears fan. So you're both welcome for the 32nd pick, and I apologize for not being able to give you Jalen Carter.
Well, my question is, by the way, we tried to warn you about Claypool. You're kind of seeing it this year.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's blind optimism, but I'm going to hope Claypool can put something together. Either way, it's his last
problem
year
is,
as a Bear.
The issue is, too, is we had those flashes from him, too. He has immense talent.
Yep.
But the key with Chase Claypool, First interception that Kenny Pickett threw, it was against, I think, a 5'11" corner. He couldn't beat him in one-on-one coverage.
Yeah.
So you're 6'5", brother. You have size, you have talent, use it.
Yeah.
He just lacks the assertiveness with his hands, and that was just such a huge thing. I think even with the first round bust, N'Keal Harry, he also wasn't assertive enough, even though that is his play style. It's where you can dominate. Guys just don't seem to translate that to the NFL, and that's what really is a shame, because you see what they could be, and they just end up not being able to live up to it because their play style doesn't match what their body says they should play like.
And the mental game was off too. Remember, first down.
Yeah,
it was 4th and 6.
My God, don't even remind me of that.
There was a lot of that happening. Top 3 wide receiver, losing, never heard of her, stuff like that. It's like,
the top 3 receiver thing I respect, because you gotta have that mentality if you're an NFL player.
He wasn't even top 3 in his division if you count Mark Andrews.
No, he wasn't. But I respect the mindset. I respect the confidence. It was definitely an insane claim. I'm not going to argue with that.
I'm sorry. When you deal with Chase Claypool talking that stuff,
I get it.
Sort of like,
I get it.
God,
yeah.
Trust me.
But yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. He won't be in Chicago after this year because we've got him and Darnell Mooney both on expiring contracts, and I think Mooney's already earned a second deal. So you're not going to pay both of them, is my point. So either way, won't have to worry about it. You guys get Joey Porter Jr., who, again, we'll talk about here in a little bit. We got to pretend like we'd have Megatron in Chicago for like 20 minutes. So take that how you will. But I definitely agree with you guys for sure. Kenny Pickett, to me, was probably the biggest change because, again, as a Bears fan, I know the trials and tribulations of Mitchell Trubisky running an offense. It is not pretty. As much, again, as I wanted to believe it was, it's not pretty at all. And then obviously, like you guys said, Najee Harris starting to run with confidence, which is massive because the dude has all of the talent in the world, just like we were talking about with Claypool. It's just he didn't have that confidence. He didn't have that mentality to really be a bruising back or somebody that can pick up extra yards with his frame, despite having that.
I think the issue there is that his offensive line was weak for the first 2 years. It improved last year, but I think the problem was he was trying to do like 55 billion different jukes like behind the line of scrimmage because there was nobody there to block for him.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's so strange because obviously I'm in college right now. I grew up watching the Steelers, who had consistently the best line. They're pretty much what the Eagles are now.
Yep, the 90s and 2000s saw the same thing.
I know. And it was just the lack of reinvestment in the offensive line, which is, this is off topic, but it's what makes the Eagles probably Super Bowl contenders down the line is the fact they keep reinvesting in their strong assets. We just ended up watching our stars get old and not have somebody there to replace them. It's a big shame, but we're back on path.
Yeah. Plus losing Munchak is O-line coach hurt too.
Oh yeah.
Although he wanted to be with his family, so I understand why he left.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair.
Yeah, I think that is actually a perfect way to look at it with Najee. His offensive line being terrible, that's going to hurt anybody's confidence. And especially when you have the expectations of being a first-round pick as a running back when we don't see that super often anymore. There was a lot of backlash from that pick from Steelers fans, non-Steelers fans, just anyone who's paying attention to the NFL. Yeah. But it looks like he's starting to turn things around. And then also, like Tree mentioned, Jalen Warren looked really nice last year. I actually came around to him, getting to watch him the other day because somebody mentioned him in passing. And I was like, was he really nice? But he was. Yeah. He was definitely
he had really good bursts through the holes. Like that was something we were lacking with Najee. Like he just goes. Like he doesn't have like vision. He's just like go. And Najee's issue too, like he used to get a little skittish back there. He got better as the year progressed. Could have been the foot injury too, but Jalen Warren just went and just took it. Yeah.
You definitely need that. Decisiveness is so key because just like quarterback windows, the windows for running also close tremendously.
Yes.
If you're panicking, like
very
instantly, those holes are going to close down, and especially with a poor line, that even exacerbates the issue even further. So definitely, with the improved O line, with the improved confidence, with the improved health, that's naturally going to make you a better running back. So it was nice not to see him continue to get clowned every week on Twitter for something he did. So hallelujah.
Yeah. And I mean, that ended up showing the improvement in the run game, both with Najee and then Jalen Warren starting to get more snaps, showed not only on tape, but if you look at the stats, the Steelers ended up in eighth in rushing EPA per play, which if you watched the Steelers run game in the first half of the year, you heard that,
rough.
then you would have never believed it.
Yeah.
Because that run game pulled a complete 180, and props to Najee for getting his shit together, props to Jalen Warren, props to whoever you want to give it to. But while we're on the topic of Pittsburgh's run game, I do want to bring up, I saw a really interesting number the other day about the percentage of runs they run, like the different types of runs. If I can find it here. The Pittsburgh Steelers were first in running jet sweeps, with 10% of their rushing plays being jet
Fucking
sweeps.
That's the Matt Canada special.
Mhm.
RPOs and jet sweeps.
Yep.
You had to bring up the word sweep, man.
Jet sweeps.
And
Oh,
not
Lord. It's like
only
we're
were
back
they-
in middle school again.
And not only were they first in jet sweeps, they were over double. They ran over double the amount of jet sweeps as the team in second place. I can't remember who they were. But it seems like, and like you guys said, this is a Matt Canada thing. This is how Canada wants to attack the outside. He's either running between the tackles or he's running a jet sweep. So just as like a quick thing, wasn't one of my questions I had written down, but how do you guys feel about that? Because I feel like that's such a unique way to approach the run game, for better or for worse, depending on how you feel about it. And again, like, they're the only team that's doing this.
It's awful. Yeah, we don't really have to explain much more than that.
It reminds me of middle
Right.
school where they used to run jet sweeps because there wasn't much to do. You know, you can run toss plays. You have Derek Watt. Now you don't. You're probably going to have Connor Hayward in that position.
Yeah.
But you can have other ways of creating motion to the outside. It only works if you have a Tyreek Hill or a burner on the outside and you have the right play call against. There were times where it did work for a first down, but that was because the defense was lining up for something differently. And the problem is when you see like something in motion, you're more or less going to detect the guy in motion unless you're in zone coverage. So usually, well, that's probably going to be a jet sweep.
Yep.
Loss of 3 on the play, 2nd and 13.
You gotta love it, man. At least we got to see Kenny have some more throwing downs in there. I'll say that.
I
Got some
agree.
good reps. Maybe that's why we ended off 4-1.
Yeah, only issue with Kenny Pickett, he does get a little skittish in the pocket. I don't know if it's because of his line play, and like that's something they're supposedly working on. But like he does have some good work outside of the pocket, but it kind of makes it unnecessary in some regards. But it might be some of those rookie jitters that he just has to get out of him. He was showing some poise in the pocket, especially in that final Cleveland game. But it's still something that you just have to build up with time.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I feel like that's something we've seen a lot of these more modern rookies cling to, is getting outside of the pocket and creating, because a lot of young quarterbacks have a little bit of mobility to them. And if they're skittish in the pocket, which most of them, if not all of them are, everyone except for like Trevor Lawrence, maybe, they're going to take off. They're going to do whatever they can to, make it easier on themselves, but in turn, they make it a lot harder on themselves. So I'm sure that's something that'll work itself out. I really like Kenny Pickett. I'm one of the few people in my circles that do, which I find very odd.
A lot of people hate Kenny Pickett on Twitter. I
Yeah.
don't know why. I mean, I'm a Pitt fan, so I might be biased. So that's probably why, like, okay, like I saw something out of him in his senior year or something just clicked. And I think like this guy could be something. So I was jumping for joy when the Steelers picked Pickett.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. And it saved you from having to watch a full season of Mitch Trubisky. That can never be a bad thing. That's something
Trubisky's
else.
a fine backup. It's just
Yeah.
he's not starting
Yes.
caliber.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, as a Bears fan, watching Trubisky, it's incredibly frustrating. He's one of those quarterbacks that every once in a while he'll do something absolutely beautiful. Crazy throw on the run, a big 20-yard run himself. But then on like the down to down, the simple stuff, he lacks. He really struggles. He's like a lost puppy in the pocket constantly. He really struggles hitting the short routes. He really struggles hitting open receivers downfield, which is so weird. Like, I can remember times where, and hopefully you guys don't have to experience this, but there is a chance. I can remember times where Allen Robinson would be 15 yards down the field wide open and Mitch would just sail it. And it's like, what are you doing? It's tough. But
To
thankfully,
that point, when I know that UrinatingTree was just talking about this, Kenny Pickett's pocket awareness, obviously he doesn't seem to be super comfortable in the pocket. One, I was looking back at my notes. That's probably why I wasn't looking super attentive, but he actually graded as one of the lowest scores, so to speak, in what I did with my rankings for his pocket presence. And then you mentioned the fact that Mitch Trubisky has those issues as well. He didn't really have a veteran to hone his skills in terms of that pocket presence the way that a lot of other quarterbacks, like even Brock Purdy with Jimmy Garoppolo, that's somebody who can stand poised in a pocket, take a hit. Mitchell Trubisky is not that. So I'm excited to see if we can bring in maybe a third stringer who has had that experience and who's a little bit better. But I am a little bit concerned in the long run if that issue doesn't, if that mentor doesn't come in.
Problem is you're not going to get a third stringer because they already re-signed Mason Rudolph and they still have
Oh,
yep.
And they signed Tanner Morgan as a UDFA, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not surprised. I'm surprised Mason Rudolph came back. I thought he wanted out because he didn't play.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
No, he probably realized he wasn't going to get an offer.
I
might as well stick here.
Don't
have to move.
XFL
no one else. Yeah, no one else is going to give Mason Rudolph a contract if we're being real here. But yeah, back to the run game. Like I said, I thought it was really interesting that Matt Canada was reliant so heavily on jet sweeps. Because like if you look at their percentages on other types of runs, right? They were 17th in the league in outside zone with 21% of their runs, 4th in inside zone with 33% of their runs. They were 8th in draw with 4% of their runs, 15th in pin and pull plays with 6% of their runs, 21st in duo with 14% of their runs, 31st in power with 1% of their runs, and 30th in counter with 1% of their runs. So this is a team that relies heavily on inside zone and jet sweeps, which
I'm surprised they don't use more power just because of, Najee and they have a fullback. So you figure you can use I for him and run just pure power.
Right. Exactly.
Well, even with a poor offensive line, power allows you to create a larger hole with the lead back as well. So it helps out the offensive line as well because they don't have to create the hole for the running back to go through by themselves. It really doesn't make sense, which is probably why we're all.
And you have a strong right side with Daniels and Mason Cole, and they graded well. So
makes no sense. Makes no sense.
The only thing that, like, to play devil's advocate for a moment, because I'm in agreement. Matt Canada is a complete moron, and I'm sure we could go on about him for hours. The only thing I can kind of look to and see why Canada wasn't running as much power and things out of I-form, despite having the personnel to do so very well, is because Pickett looks a lot more comfortable when he's in gun than when he does under center or running play action or anything like that. So to me, that's the only thing that kind of makes it make sense. And if that's the case, then I get it because you want your young quarterback to be comfortable, but you still have to switch it up because that's one of the big things with Matt Canada. He doesn't switch anything up. He has found like 3 things that kind of worked maybe like 5 years ago and has not gone away from those since. And that's why y'all's offense is in the situation it is. So that's my next question for you. Like, you got to be furious that Matt Canada is still around, right? Like, what are your thoughts on him as a whole?
The thing is, I'm kind of not surprised that they fired him because his contract doesn't expire. The Steelers don't fire coaches. They either retire, their contracts expire, or in the Bruce Arians case, they hold them hostage until they retire. Last person I can really think who was fired as a coach or GM was Tom Donahoe over 20 years ago. So it's a positive if you have loyalty, but at the same time, you haven't really developed any good coordinators or coaches that have really moved on to the ranks. When's the last person who's really been seen as a coaching candidate from the Steelers as like an ORD coordinator? I mean, LeBeau was solid, but he was more a coordinator type. Like it certainly wasn't Haley, it wasn't Fietner. I mean, Arians didn't get coaching like looks until he left. So. I mean, I'm kind of not surprised, but I'm disappointed at the same time.
I think that's probably the Achilles heel of the organization is the fact that they don't have the balls to actually go and, do what needs to be done. I feel like literally a simple coaching change, a simple new OC could easily be, in terms of wins above replacement, 2 or 3 games. And you can't really get that with anybody but probably a first round pick or if you steal a stud later on. So I don't understand why it's perplexing to get rid of that, but
I think the thing too is if you look at the research, the Steelers pay the least or one of the least for assistant coaches in the NFL. So there is some the Rooney's mentioned too in the NFLPA ratings, like the training facilities and like the locker rooms are some of the worst in football, or some like they don't have the confidence of them spending. So it may be a sort of cheap angle as well, trying to save money. I'm not sure about that per se. I don't want to be on record saying that, but if it's like if there's smoke, Could be
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah.
Right.
If you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, though.
Exactly. You pay for what you get.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just incredibly frustrating because, like we've all said, we like Kenny Pickett. He's a bright young quarterback. You've got these great weapons around him. You're building up the offensive line in front of him. You've got good players in your backfield. It's just nothing's being done with him. It feels like a complete waste. And like I said, I was watching Brett Coleman's video the other day, him and his co-host on the Bootleg podcast, EJ Snyder, talking about the Steelers. And Brett Coleman put it perfectly. He how'd he put it? He said, Canada likes to play the hitch. You know, everybody loves Freebird. Freebird's great, but every once in a while you got to play something else. You got to switch it up a bit. And it's just so frustrating to see an offensive coordinator in today's NFL where everybody is just more creative than ever, more innovative than ever, just refusing to even attempt anything. It's mind-blowing. And like you guys said, you know, I get the whole Pittsburgh doesn't fire coaches thing, but there's always got to be an exception to the rule, right? There has to be. And Matt Canada feels like the most obvious exception ever.
Yeah, he hasn't been.
Well, they use the improvement of the offense as an excuse to not fire him.
Right.
But if you look at a lot of their wins last year, they were on the final drives where Pickett was probably calling the plays in 2-minute drill. So it was those improvements were made in spite of Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the unfortunate nature of the league, right? Everybody always finds some sort of excuse to get themselves a leg up or keep their job. And, you know, it's a weird thing to want to see a coach get fired just because at the end of the day, that's a human being and you're rooting for them to lose their job. But I mean, come on. It just feels so blatantly obvious at this point that Canada needs to go.
Yeah, I'll say this. I feel like his style, we're talking about it, is suited for a lower level of football. I know, and you know, there is stuff like the AAF, there's the XFL, USFL. I don't know if the AAF is still around, but that was just one that popped in my head. There are these lower leagues, so to speak, that honestly could have a good vacancy where something like that works when, you know, the talent is lesser and you can take advantage of that. Then, you know, you could actually have a really good career. So I know that we're wishing for somebody's downfall in terms of, you know, that guy's a family, yada, yada. But I think that at the end of the day, one, it's a business, but two, there's a role that does work for him. It's just not in the NFL.
Yeah, he had some success in college. 1 year at Pitt, like he was at LSU, didn't really work out, but he had like, you know, stints around in college. So he'll get another job. It's not like he's never going to come back.
Right.
I mean, CFL might work for him too. I mean, considering the different style of play. But as I said, it's just like he's just overmatched at this level, at least to me.
For sure.
Yeah. But moving on to something a little more optimistic for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the defense. And surprisingly, this group ended up being like middle of the road, which is crazy considering it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a team that always has one of the 10 best defenses in football. That's just point blank period. Put your money on it. It's always going to happen. But you end up in 15th in run defense EPA per play, 18th in coverage EPA per play, 10th in points allowed, which makes a lot of sense. Again, there's a little bit of that Pittsburgh still in there, but they were giving up a lot. And a big reason for that is their defensive scheme and the personnel they had to run it, specifically in the back end. And obviously we'll talk about the moves they made during the offseason because that was a big emphasis both in free agency and the draft was fixing the cornerback room. Because this defense, and I love it as a Bears fan, is very, very similar to like the mid 2000s Bears and any other team that ran these hard Tampa 2 defenses. Because you're looking at a team that they were 23rd in cover 0. They were 9th in cover 1, 6th in cover 2, 9th in cover 3, all the way in 32nd in quarters, which is what everybody feels like they're running these days. And then 5th in cover 5, which is just cover 2 man with underneath corners and whatnot. Like this was a beautiful defense to watch run. And it's very Pittsburgh because the idea of this defense is you probably know what's coming, but we don't care because our guys are better than yours and they're going to stop you anyways. It's just, like I said, the cornerback room didn't have the manpower to do that. And then obviously you didn't have TJ Watt for the full season, which is going to make things a hell of a lot harder as well. So just as a whole, what were your thoughts on the defense last year for Pittsburgh?
I think it really showed, for one thing, if you don't have TJ Watt in the lineup, you don't have pressure on the quarterback, your defense pretty much becomes useless, because the key of a Tampa 2 is inside linebacker play. And one of our biggest issues over the past couple years, and I mean, it sucks that Ryan Shazier went down, inside linebacker play. Devin Bush, since he tore his ACL, he just was not the same, and it was very frustrating because his rookie year was fantastic. Miles Jack was very underwhelming, same as Joe Schobert a couple years ago. You've overhauled that inside linebacker room. So I think Landon Roberts and I forget Cole Holcomb. Cole Holcomb. And I think there's like Mark
Nick
Robinson,
Herbig.
Nick Herbig too.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's a bit of that as well. So you're looking at an overhauled inside linebacker core. Alex Highsmith, though, has been really good. He's really started to blossom into his own. The Steelers brass has really loved him.
For sure.
And you did mention about the run defense. That's actually a drastic improvement over last year, because that was one of the worst run defenses we had seen in decades. And that was because Aluwala went down. You had nobody there. You had a healthy Larry Ogunjobi, so that helps out a bit. You did get a little bit of a fix in that in the second round, I believe. Yes, so you do have that. And corner is going to be more of an overhaul. You did lose Cameron Sutton. He did get paid a lot in Detroit. I don't know if he's probably going to look at him as maybe a number one and number two. You do have Joey Porter Jr. now. Pat Pete's coming in. Probably he's more of a mentor type. Maybe a guy can do a 2 or 3. You still have Levi Wallace, Justin Lane. You still have him. And then your safeties. I mean, Keanu Neal. Let's hope he can stay healthy. And also, Minka. So, varies per se.
I mean, we have pieces everywhere. Again, we still haven't, I personally believe we haven't fixed the inside linebacking core.
No.
It's not good. I thought especially like in the 7th round, one of my favorite players was Ivan Pace Jr. And it kind of felt the way Devin Bush was coming in. He's somebody who is a hard hitting type of dude. I got to see him in person because I go to SMU. I got to see him. He's like someone who will start fights, and it's just like one of those hard-nosed type of guys. In the Senior Bowl, he decked an offensive lineman that was pulling at 230 pounds. Like, you just don't find guys like that. He, of course, is on the Vikings, where they drafted one of my favorite linebackers the year before. But it's one of those big issues. And it's a big issue when a lot of teams run these zone run schemes. Your linebackers need to fill the holes that open. And we just don't have that capability. And that's why I am a little bit more pessimistic on the run defense this year, too.
Yeah. On the bright side with that, you do have a lot of really talented interior defensive men opening up the holes for those guys. So hopefully their job will be made a hell of a lot easier, and it won't be as glaring as it probably would be on another team, because I agree 100%. The linebacker core in Pittsburgh is absolutely a need. It needs
rough.
Improvement.
Yeah, and that's rare because the Steelers have always prided themselves on really good linebacking cores.
Right, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely tough to look at, but the secondary is going to be a lot better, at least on paper. I would assume. I mean, you got a bunch of physical man corners, and that's what you want in this Tampa 2 defense. You want somebody that's just going to go at the line of scrimmage and beat the receiver up. And I mean, Joey Porter Jr. is the definition of that. Pat Pete still has a little bit of that. And even Corey Trice that you drafted in the 6th or 7th round, if he can stay healthy, same type of dude. Freakish size. He's built like a strong safety at corner. Again, we'll talk about him here in a little bit, but yeah, I think they did a good job everywhere except linebacker, really addressing the issues they had last year. And hopefully they'll be able to run their defense a lot better next year. Another thing Tree pointed out that I do want to give mention to is the pass rush in Pittsburgh, because obviously Alex Highsmith is awesome. He looked really, really good last year. TJ Watt, arguably the best pass rusher in football right now. And another thing with the Tampa 2, at least the brand of the Tampa 2 that Pittsburgh is running currently, is relying on 4 guys to get home. You're not blitzing a lot, especially not the linebackers aren't blitzing a lot. And when TJ Watt goes down, we saw it last year, they don't get home. It was really, really a struggle.
Malik Reed's a backup, so like he was okay, but he's nowhere near TJ Watt.
No.
It almost feels like the identity of this defense is let's do whatever we can to give TJ 2 seconds to get in the backfield, and he's going to get there more often than not.
Yep. So I'd like to say get bailed out by high-end talent, and that's TJ Watt.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like the identity of Pittsburgh right now, is just getting bailed out by high-end talent. That's a perfect way to put it. But yeah, I think we can move on from there and talk about free agency. Obviously, Pittsburgh made a few moves here and there. But looking at the losses first, I just want to ask whether it's because of their play on the field or some sort of connection you had to them, whether it's someone you just really liked or someone who made a play somewhere. What free agent loss hurt you the most?
I'll go first. I think it's Cam Sutton, just because of the fact that we've had so many holes in the secondary, especially the corner core, and we finally had somebody who was a little bit more consistent. And it was kind of nice just to be able to take a win here and there with him. And then obviously now he's gone in Detroit. But luckily, we'll talk about it soon, we've been able to patch it pretty damn well. But I don't like losing good assets from an area that was already a weakness.
My question, though, would you pay Cam Sutton over $10 million a year for 3 years? Because that's what it would have taken in Detroit.
Yeah,
that's the problem. He got paid a lot. He got paid number one corner money, and
Absolutely.
I don't know if he's the number one corner.
Before we got JPJ, I felt the pain. So we'll talk about that when we talk about the draft, though.
I felt more pain when we lost Mike Hilton, to be completely honest with you. But
oh, absolutely. The guy got paid $8 million a year too when he got poached. That's ridiculous. Yeah. But that just opened up an old scar. Thanks for that.
It did. I don't like it either. Trust me.
Yep.
Tree, was there anyone that stood out to you?
Mostly Sutton, I would say, but otherwise, like, it was mostly guys that didn't really perform well or were just like kind of there per se. Like Derek Watt, you didn't really use him. I mean, Devin Bush, man, you weren't going to bring him back. He's in Seattle now. Well, hope he can come back, man. Miles Jack was probably one of the more disappointing players because I thought he was going to do well here. You know, it was like the red dot, and he just was just He didn't really mesh in the system. So I thought we were going to lose Ogunjobi, but he came back. So
that was awesome.
That was huge. Yeah. I will say I'm a big fullback guy. So anytime I see a fullback lose their job, it hurts me a little bit. But like you said, Derek Watt wasn't much more than a special teamer for y'all. He did catch a pass from Chase Claypool last year, which was beautiful. One of my favorite plays of the entire season.
I think you already have a built-in replacement too, Connor Hayward. So I think they're going to groom him as the fullback.
Well, not only that, but they signed one who is incredibly similar to Derek Watt and Monty Potabom from Iowa, who is a UDFA. So they've got options. They'll figure it out. I'm sure it'll end up being Hayward that gets the job just because nowadays you want a more versatile fullback and Hayward being more of like an H-back tight end type. That's kind of his cup of tea, and he's damn good at it. But yeah, it sucks seeing Derek Watt lose his job. But like you guys said, outside of Cam Sutton, there really wasn't anyone who makes a major impact on your team. Like Miles Jack, Terrell Edmonds, Devin Bush, William Jackson III, Malik Reed, excuse me. Those were like the biggest names I could pull out. None of them were anything great.
Terrell Edmonds is more of like a box safety. He didn't really go and like pass coverage. So like he was a take it or leave it kind of guy. He's like, okay. I mean, I'm kind of like it kind of sucks that he's gone, but I understand why.
For the price tag as well. Obviously, the Eagles paid him $2 million. It's like, it would have been nice to have a little bit. It was a cheap contract. I'm not sure if it was exactly 2, but it was pretty damn low. But it was tough seeing him go.
And then running through the retained free agents already, Tree already mentioned Larry Ogunjobi sticking around, which is awesome. One of the more underrated 3-techs in the league. Still mad he couldn't land in Chicago. Damn physical he failed. And then Anthony Miller, Zach Gentry, DeMonte Casey, Christian Kuntz, the long snapper, Mason Rudolph, James Pierre, Miles Boykin. All guys that definitely have a role to fill in Pittsburgh for sure. Definitely some nice names there. And then looking at the free agents they added, which of these names excites you the most?
I mean, that's a tough call because, like, as I said, it's like they had like interesting pieces. I would probably say the low-key one I really like is Isaac Seumalo for left guard position because Kevin Dotson, like your left side, was pretty weak last year. Dotson, I don't think the Steelers have ever really liked. I know, like, analytics, they're kind of underrated, but it's like, he leaves a bit to be desired. He's more of like a depth option. And then Dan Moore's blind side left a lot to be desired too. He's a natural right tackle. So bring in Seumalo, you can either keep him left guard or convert him to right and then move James Daniels to left. So you do have a lot of option, and it strengthens the interior of your offensive line, which once again you need for guys like Najee, Jalen Warren, and Kenny Pickett.
Yep. No, that's great. To I guess change it up, because that was going to be my answer anyway. I'm a big offensive line guy, to be fair, so I'm a little bit biased on that. Patrick Peterson, just because one, we get a corner, but two, when we talk about the draft, I think it's a perfect mentor for someone who's a lot more grabbing, a lot more physical, like Joey Porter Jr. It's literally the perfect mentor for someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then some of the other notable names we already talked about: Cole Holcomb, Allen Robinson got brought in for what, a 7th-round pick swap, I think.
Yeah, and salary retained by the Rams.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, hey, hopefully Robinson can do something. I still think there's talent there, because a lot of what he does well isn't like athletic based. It's really just based off being really smart and being really precise. And hopefully there's still a little bit of that there as like the 3rd or 4th receiver.
Yeah, probably the 4. If he becomes Jericho Cotchery of the mid-2000s, I'd be happy.
Yeah, there you go. And then Nate Herbig ended up drafting his brother, which is pretty cool. Chandon Sullivan, another Vikings corner. Landon Roberts, the other linebacker. And then Armand Watts, someone I know very well. He was in Chicago last year. Solid run defender, good depth.
Yeah.
And then Keanu Neal, the other safety. So that moves us to the draft. And I'm just going to ask again, because I feel like we're rolling here. Who was your favorite draft pick?
Ooh, I mean, that's a tough call, because there were actually some really good
Absolutely.
picks.
Yeah.
I love their draft, to be completely honest with you. They were aggressive when they needed to. They were passive when they needed to. They drafted for need where you need be. I had reservations about picking Joey Porter Jr. at 17, the nepotism and connections part. But at 32, it's a lot easier to swallow when he's best need with him and Brian Branch.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Best pick, I have to go Broderick Jones. He is a huge, a mower at left tackle. Huge pickup. You didn't have to give up much to get him, because I feel like Bill Belichick just wanted to screw over the Jets. And he was pretty much the perfect option. Him or Christian Gonzalez were pretty much, the two guys I was kind of looking at that position, because, Paris Johnson was going to be long gone by that point. Because he was going to have to, he's probably going to be a Cardinal. But Broderick Jones, I mean, he's a natural blindside blocker. I think once he molds in, I think you have your starter there for a decade if it works out properly.
For sure.
Yeah. For me, I am a huge JPJ fan. That's just who I am. I think that with corners, you can't evaluate them based on the tape. You need to evaluate them based on the fit. It's more of a post-team fit evaluation, which is on paper, you'll see Christian Gonzalez get burned in certain coverages. And it's the Patriots, you're going to play to his strengths, not to his weaknesses. But that's why I think that's one of the best picks of the first round, even though I necessarily wasn't as high as everybody else. But with Joey Porter Jr., I just saw his awareness of the field. There's a guy also, Jalen Jones, who went in the 7th round, who also had this, just being able to understand what's going on around them without looking uncomfortable. When you watch a defensive back, especially in space, you can tell whether they're occupying a zone or just standing in the area they're supposed to be. And he definitely seemed to command his zone very well. And I think that, the big issue was he's really grabby. Sometimes he reacts a little bit late. But then when you pair that with the mentor of Patrick Peterson, that is literally the perfect guy to emphasize the weaknesses that he has. So post-pick, it was honestly awesome. And especially since we have absolutely no corners to really mention over the past 5 years that are dominant on the boundary, it was really refreshing.
Yeah, and I agree with Tree 100%. This draft was fantastic. It's easily one of, if not the best draft anybody had. My favorite pick y'all made, I talked about him earlier, was Keanu Benton. He was one of my favorite players in the entire class. Yeah, and ironically, reminds me a lot of Cam Hayward coming out. He's just this big, smart run defender that has more upside as a pass rusher than you'd expect. His tool belt as a pass rusher is already quite refined. It's just he needs a little bit of work in kind of getting off double teams and things like that. But he's a lot twitchier than you'd expect for someone who's 340 pounds. He's a mauler, kicked ass at the Senior Bowl, fantastic anchor, really good leverage. He is the perfect day one nose tackle that can eventually take over for Cam Hayward. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think this guy's going to be a Pro Bowler in Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be somebody that Steelers fans are going to fall in love with very, very quickly. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do there. But yeah, Joey Porter Jr., obviously perfect fit. You've got the connection with his dad. I agree with Tree that at 17 might have been a little rich, but I could have stomached it. Getting him at 32, fantastic value. You're welcome for that again, by the way. And then Broderick Jones, probably the traitsiest tackle in this draft. You're hoping your offensive line coaching can really, kind of work out some of those kinks. And I'm confident they can. I like what Pittsburgh's doing with their offensive line. I like the direction they're heading. And then looking at some of their other picks, Darnell Washington.
Yeah.
How the hell was he there in the third
It's an
round?
intriguing project, and like you have a lot of options there because you're going to emphasize his run blocking, and he has upside as a pass catcher. If you really like mesh him properly, like you have a lot of options, which is why you could probably move Connor Hayward to fullback, and you have a bunch of different options you can really bring in and emphasize that offense and really add weapons for Kenny Pickett.
Yeah,
for sure.
Darnell Washington he's going to be a boom or bust prospect in terms of the pass catcher, because it's either you're going to use him properly, which if we use him on a jet sweep, I swear to God, I'm going to not be a Steelers fan. Can you imagine that man on a freaking jet sweep? I will lose my shit.
Well, I mean, it couldn't be as bad as Todd Downing, right? Third string tight end and backup quarterback on jet sweeps.
That is fair. I'll give you that one.
I mean, if we're using Mason Rudolph on a jet sweep, I am getting those Pickets and I'm going right to Acrisure Stadium to fire it.
Honestly, though. You can grab an extra one for me when you do that. But,
right.
Darnell, there was this clip that's going around Twitter of Darnell doing pretty much a fade route, and everyone's like, oh, he's so slow. Well, one, he's not versus anybody. But two, you're not going to be looking at this guy as a speed target. He's going to use his body and his leverage, unlike Chase Claypool did. No offense, again, to the Bears fans out there. R.I.P. David. And he's going to use his leverage. He's going to use his size. This guy's pretty much a tackle running around on the field who can catch. And you just need to emphasize the strengths. And I think they can. So, as long as Canada doesn't become an idiot, which,
that's a big ask.
That's a big ask. We're going to have something with Darnell.
Yeah. And I mean, you're looking at a dude that's 6'7", 280. Fantastic blocker.
He's 265, 270. But yeah, I mean, he's a monster.
Whatever. He's a massive human being is the point here. And yeah, like you said, he's going to be a fantastic extra lineman on the field at the very beginning. You're hoping you can develop him as a pass catcher. I think his hands are already pretty solid. It's the route running that worries me, but he's a tight end. That doesn't have to be perfect. He's, at the end of the day, you can probably just send him on a seam route and just throw it up to him and pray, and it's going to work.
Develop that with time too. So.
Right, for sure. I'm definitely really excited to see what they do with him, especially considering they already have a really good tight end in Pat Freiermuth. That can be terrifying coming out in 12 personnel with those two. And then, like Tree said, throw Connor Hayward at fullback, come out in 22 personnel. Good luck.
Yeah.
Right.
My only concern about Freiermuth are the concussions. He had about 2 over this past year. Sure. And if he gets another, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
That's why Darnell might be an insurance policy too.
True. And hell, you can do a lot worse on insurance than Darnell Washington. You got a 6'7" tight end that hurdled a guy one time. So,
right.
To be fair, Darnell also was paired up with Broderick Jones. So you already have instant chemistry there if you are going to line them up next to each other on those wide zone runs. But also Darnell. So funny thing is, when I was scouting for Jamari Sawyer, my buddy Broshma would always bring up the fact that Sawyer always had a bookend tight end next to him to make sure that, the edge was sealed, and that tight end was Darnell Washington before we got to know who he was. So he's been naturally the extra point assister, so to speak, for the offensive line. And I think that's going to be a great addition right out the gate.
Yeah. And then next pick, Nicholas Herbig, who we've already talked about, was an edge rusher in college, but has the ability to play as an off-ball linebacker. He's built more like an off-ball linebacker. He just really wasn't asked to do that at Wisconsin. I definitely think, though, if Pittsburgh does want to run him inside, then they can do something with it. He's super smart. He's quick. He can be a good blitzer down the middle. Like, there's different things you can do with him. You can line him up a couple different places. He's a really interesting chess piece for the defense and should hopefully add something there. And then Corey Trice, who we've already mentioned, just a really physical corner, perfect scheme fit. And then Spencer Anderson, who's just your classic versatile offensive lineman that can play all 5 spots, at least 4 out of the 5.
Yeah. You can always use that depth. I will never complain about O-line depth or O-line picks.
For sure.
Preach.
And then, like I said, I got to give props to Monty Potebaum, who you guys picked up out of free agency after the draft out of Iowa. Some of the best blocker vision I've seen out of a college fullback in a long time. He looks like a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's got long, blonde, flowing hair, the big shoulder pads, the neck roll.
Oh, dude, the
he
90s
belonged in
Let's
Pittsburgh.
go.
Yeah, he belonged in
Yeah.
Pittsburgh.
Are you just saying that because Iowa wears black and gold and plays a very similar style to the Steelers?
No, I'm saying it because he looks like, when I think old football, Pittsburgh's one of the first teams that come to mind. And this guy is old football to a T. Ran like a 4.8, not super fast, just really physical, hits dudes really hard. Like I said, great vision as a blocker. Like, he is an old school traditional fullback. And players like that, they got to go to Pittsburgh, Chicago, Green Bay, or Dallas. And Chicago already has their fullback. Dallas got Hunter Lipke, who's one of the best fullbacks I've ever seen in college ever. I hate Green Bay. I'm glad they didn't pick him up. And then, so that leaves Pittsburgh. But draft was great. Free agency was pretty solid. Just to wrap things up, to kind of not wrap things up, second to last thing, and then we'll wrap things up. Looking at the roster in Pittsburgh, kind of going position by position. We've talked about the quarterbacks. We've talked about the running backs. Moving to the receivers, this group was, I don't want to say underwhelming, but they didn't do what they should have. I think they were like 12th in drops and just really didn't do Pickett as many favors as you'd expect from a group with George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. So what are your thoughts on the receiver core as a whole as it stands?
I mean, there is upside there. George Pickens has oozes talent, and I don't think Canada really utilized him all that well because they weren't really looking his way. Deontay Johnson was the guy they were really throwing to, and like, he had a really good 2021. He limited the drops there, but 2022 was just like, he went back to his 2020 form. He was dropping a lot of balls he should have caught. There was a lot of issues there. They had Steven Sims catching passes at some point. I mean, some of that was because they traded Claypool, which, I mean, you take that any day of the week. I was shocked they got a second-round pick for him, to be completely honest with you. But
it's I mean, time that's been brought up, but all right.
Yeah, look. We're not trying to run a victory lap. We're just saying, it's like, we're just venting because we had a lot of frustrations with Claypool.
No, I get it.
But I mean, Freiermuth had like upside as well, like when in the system. But as I said, I think part of that was the quarterback pain too, and Canada. So if they can mesh that out, I think they can really like gel, not to a high end passing game, but at least mid range.
Yeah, and I think that there's an X factor that's going to come into play, and that's Calvin Austin. He was one of those guys who I fell in love with, and he just wasn't healthy. And you talk about that role Deontay Johnson was playing under the condition that he ends up wanting to leave. Maybe there's a bigger contract elsewhere. You never know what happens down the line. I feel like his skill set could complement that role well, but I also feel like he has a permanent role in the offense in the slot as long as he stays healthy, as long as he's able to get up to speed, because that's tough when you're not even able to play really a down of football and you're instantly hurt during your rookie year. It's not easy to come in your first year after an injury and make a big splash, but man, that guy is fun to watch. You got to watch out for him.
Yeah, and I really like that you brought up Calvin Austin as an X factor, because I had that written down in my notes. Similarly, because you look at Pittsburgh's numbers last year, they were fourth in air yard percentage. Goodness, I can't talk. With over 50% of their over 50% of their yards coming straight through the air. I don't know why I can't talk right now. Meaning that they weren't that good after the catch. And you look at George Pickens, you look at Deontay Johnson. Those aren't guys that are ever going to be like superstars after the catch. So you bring in Calvin Austin, who's this gadgety slot receiver that you can get the ball to quickly. He can make guys see super fast. That can be huge for this offense. You get Kenny Pickett in rhythm early, throw a couple drag routes, let him take it for 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe even to the house. And all of a sudden, this offense is a lot more dynamic, despite the really repetitive and simplistic play calling that you're getting from Matt Canada. So I agree. Calvin Austin's going to be huge for you guys. Obviously, Allen Robinson, who we've already mentioned, can make an impact as well, especially since they're not going to be as much pressure on him. The expectations aren't going to be there. He's away from Matt Stafford, who apparently hates his guts. Like, he is in a much better situation to succeed. Pat Freiermuth, if he can stay healthy, is awesome. The offensive line's looking a hell of a lot better. Just overall, Pittsburgh's offense, I'm excited to watch. Like, again, I know like Kenny Pickett is an unpopular opinion outside of Pittsburgh, but I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in an offense that can at least make him a little confident in what's going on, and he can trust a little bit, even if the play calling sucks. I feel like this year you want to see growth. Next year, Canada's gone. You bring in a new OC, and that's when things start to really pick up. That's when you're looking at Pickett as like, top 15 quarterback, hopefully, and Pittsburgh can start actually doing some damage. But I think they definitely have put enough around him to at least see growth, and I think that's fantastic for this year.
Honestly, the one thing I am concerned about, if Calvin Austin is healthy, you have like Calvin Austin, Gunnar Olszewski, these guys who are really dynamic. It's going to be a shit ton of jet sweeps to these guys, and I'm going to lose my mind. But
I didn't want to mention it, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, you can mock us for jet sweeps if we're doing the same to you. That's all I'm going to say.
That's fair.
Yeah. It's, we saw what I say, 10%? Shooting 10%, for 15 or 20 next year.
Oh, dude, don't pound him. He'll do 25.
Easy.
He'll be in shotgun and they're still running jet sweeps. They're going to move up center and do jet sweeps.
Yeah.
It's going to be like fourth quarter, down by 21. You got to do a play quick. Jet sweep.
Jet sweep to Darnell Washington. That's how we're going to do it. That's the
jet sweep to
that's the new fullback
Herbig.
Dive. That's what I'm hearing. That's the new fullback dive. Darnell Washington on a jet sweep. Somebody's getting hurt. Something's going to happen. But yeah, offensive line, definitely a lot better than it was. You're excited to see Broderick Jones develop. Isaac Seumalo is a big pickup. James Daniels, as much as it hurts me to say it, is a lot better in Pittsburgh than he was in Chicago. Looks awesome for y'all. Okafor, pretty solid last year. And then Mason Cole. I don't know what your thoughts are on him. I honestly don't have any myself. Like, I think he's fine, but he doesn't do anything that like blows me away. He also didn't do anything that I'm like, oh my God, get this guy out of Pittsburgh immediately. He's just a fine player.
Considering how bad Kendrick Green was when he was converting to center, he was eons better. He's Dermont Dawson compared to Kendrick.
Fair enough.
The fact that we could have Quinn Meinerz and then we ended up with freaking Kenyon Green made me rip my hair.
Honestly, that whole draft ripped me up because if I'm back on it, it would have been Landon Dickerson in the first round and Creed Humphrey in the second. I would have gone heavy O-line.
Yeah.
I mean, Pat Freiermuth's a nice player, but Creed Humphrey was the pick.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he's already easily top 3 center in football. And Freiermuth, I mean, he's nice, but the way tight ends work right now, you've got 5 or 6 elite ones, and then everyone else is kind of battling for 7th, and it's not a very exciting race if we're being totally honest.
Yeah, and most of those elite tight ends are going to get picked in the first round these days.
Yeah, absolutely. But moving over to the defense, obviously you can sing as many praises as you want for this interior defensive line. Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton, who's listed as nose tackle right now, Cam Hayward, DeMarvin Leal, Armon Watts, Marchavius Adams, Braden Fiocco. The list goes on of just talent on the interior of this defensive line. Yeah. This is very much Pittsburgh. Again, you're building up the trenches, really delving into, okay, we're going to rush for every single play and we're going to get home. And if everyone stays healthy, that's going to work because you have the guys to do it for sure. And then obviously edge rushers, TJ Watt, Nicholas Herbig's listed as an edge, but like we said, he could probably play inside linebacker if needed. Alex Highsmith, Marcus Golden, who I think just got signed recently in the past month or so.
Yep.
And then, for sure. A quietly good signing. I feel like not a lot of people were talking about it when it happened because of the point in the offseason we're in, but definitely a quality move. Then Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts, Tanner Muse, Nick Kwiatkowski, my boy, one of my favorite players of all time. I'm just realizing how many former Bears are in Pittsburgh right now. That's really weird.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of former Bears too. Anthony Miller, Rashad Coward. A few others too, I think.
Trubisky, Robinson. I guess I got to root for Pittsburgh this year. Y'all are holding on to some of my boys. And then quarterback room, we've already talked about everybody there. So special teams, let's talk there for a minute. Chris Boswell. I'm having a horrible time today. Chris Boswell, Presley Harvin, Gunnar Olszewski. How are we feeling about the special teams unit in Pittsburgh? Because obviously you have one of the longest tenured and best special teams coaches in football. Can't remember his name for the life of me.
Danny Smith.
Yeah. There you go. He's been around the league forever, and he does a hell of a job at what he does.
I mean, Boswell's Boswell. He's just usually automatic, except for that 1 year in 2018 where he was injured.
Yeah.
So you're usually guaranteeing him at least 85% field goals made minimum, and with a good bite of 50-yarders. So he's pretty automatic. Presley Harvin, I've always liked. I don't know if the Steelers are really that enthralled with him though. Like they feel like they could get a little more with like net yards and just punting speed in general. And not just Olszewski that's going to be returning. Calvin Austin will be another one that'll be returning kicks and punts as well. So there'll be a lot of competition there too.
They're all practicing for the jet sweeps later in the drive.
Yes. Jet sweeps in the middle of the kick return.
In the middle of the kick. Can you imagine they started doing like laterals just to like mimic it? I'm going to lose my mind.
Yes. Dude. You got to practice, baby.
I know.
If they win the Super Bowl, they'll jet sweep it.
Oh, can you imagine?
The parade is going to be run in the motion of a jet sweep.
Yeah, it's just going to be like the parade's just going to like the Super Bowl's just going to be running endless jet sweeps.
Endless jet sweeps.
All the way to Point State Park where it will be jet swept into the ocean.
Oh. And the whole time Mike Tomlin's going to be tied up in the basement somewhere screaming, trying to stop it. But
Mike Tomlin's just going to be sitting there like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, good point.
He'll just be like with glasses on like, eh.
Yeah.
The defense is doing their job. That's all I care about.
Exactly. That's his baby.
For sure. So to wrap things up, I got a two-parter question for you. Who are you most excited to watch this year outside of Kenny Pickett? Because I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out answer saying the young quarterback. So who are you most excited to watch, and ceiling, floor, and record prediction for Pittsburgh this year?
I'm really excited to watch George Pickens. I think he can blossom this year, especially with the talent he showed, and like not just in Georgia's intensity, just like as long as he doesn't turn into Antonio Brown, I think he'll be a fantastic addition. And I think like he can really turn into that number one receiver we've been lacking for a long time. Well, since Antonio. But at the same time, I would say the floor, I mean, it's Mike Tomlin. It's an 8 or 9 win floor. And you're not going lower than that. If you're 2-7, you're somehow going to BS your way to 9-7. It's just the way it goes. But your upside, if Kenny Pickett, turns into something interesting, if your inside linebacking core holds up, if you're mostly healthy, I can see 11, 12 wins and the division out of this team. Yeah. So I'm going to say 9 wins, just because Tomlin. Yeah.
Okay. Well, for me, the player I'm most excited to see, I would say Joey Porter Jr., but when healthy, Calvin Austin, because all jokes aside, those jet sweeps, you are actually going to be able to see him in action. So it is very exciting to see someone who does have that body control and the quick twitch that he does have, being able to add a new piece of that offense. But I mean, Joey Porter Jr. on the other side, just because I'm excited to see, one, how he's going to stumble in the beginning, trying to mitigate the holding issues, but being able to see him blossom over the year and finally have some defensive back to love on the Steelers. That's not in the safety core, but floor, like I said earlier, Mike Tomlin's going to sell his left nut for a 9-win season. He's going to have to do everything he can, and it's the best bet that you can make because it's what he does. But I mean, I predicted them at, I believe, 10-8. I'm literally going over to my slides right now just to check. It was it's a 10-8, 10-7. But I mean, I definitely think there's a couple toss-up games in there, especially in division. I could see him getting up to 11, 12 wins, but that's a big ask.
That's your peak. Like, that's your peak. That's if every single thing goes right.
Big ask. I'm definitely going to lean probably 10 is the probable max, and then 9 is the absolute floor. I don't care. We could have Mitchell Trubisky. We'll get 9 wins. We'll find a way.
No, you can have Mason Rudolph and probably get 9 wins too. Just how it is. You can bring back Duck Hodges out of retirement, get 9 wins.
Not Duck Hodges.
Duck Hodges is he retired last year. He's,
interesting.
I think he has a duck calling podcast now.
Really? Good for him.
Good for him.
Yep.
Power to him.
I love Duck Hodges, man.
Oh, dude, he was a local legend. I mean, he had like 4 games where it's like, you know what? He has no arm strength, but you know what? He's strong, and it's like, crap.
See, I'm from Western Maryland. I've grown up in Western Maryland, lived in Western Maryland my whole life. So everyone around me is a Steelers fan. And I can remember people gaslighting themselves into thinking Duck Hodges was the future. Back in early high school. It was beautiful. It was certainly something to witness. But for me, player I'm most excited to watch, like I said, I love Keanu Benton. He was one of my favorite players in the draft class as a whole. Him, and then whoever ends up playing fullback, whether it's Connor Hayward, Monty Potebaum, whoever it is. Like I said, fullbacks are my thing. They're my bread and butter. Love to see him play. And then I agree with you guys. I don't think there's much debate to be had. Floor 8 or 9 wins, ceiling 11, 12, maybe 13 wins. And then I think they're going to land right around 10 wins for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It all lands on Pickett. It all lands on the health, and it all lands on the inside linebackers, like Tree said. But while Alex was talking, that actually raised another question for me real quick. Last thing I want to ask. The AFC North is incredibly competitive right now. Like across the board, even Cleveland, as much as I hate to admit it because of the individual throwing the football for them, they are incredibly competitive all throughout. So I want to ask, what team in the AFC North are you most scared of right now? And you can't say nobody. You have to pick somebody.
I got to say Cincinnati. With Joe Burrow, with that receiving core, even with the upgrades at corner, they had our number a lot of times. They would have won both games if they had a long snapper. So I believe more likely they're going to be the true threat. If they can fix their issues at safety, because they did lose Von Bell and Jesse Bates, I think they're going to be a foe no matter what, as long as they have Joe Burrow intact.
Yeah, I'm going to do the cheap cop out and go the Bengals as well. Obviously, I think the Ravens are always a threat that you need to identify right away. But the big issue with them is even though they are switching to a more pass-heavy offense, they're still switching a system. So one, it's not proven, but two, so like I guess you could say there's higher potential, but two, they need to get used to the new system. And Lamar hasn't been able to perform in that offense yet. And, you know, I'm obviously going to be more on the pessimistic side when someone's getting used to a new system rather than
for sure
when someone's a little bit more comfortable.
And your best weapons are a first-round rookie and OBJ making $15 million a year coming off an ACL surgery. So
exactly.
You're relying a lot on Mark Andrews.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the AFC North shakes out. I love that it's ultra competitive because this division is just so aggressive, and there's clearly hatred when any two teams take the field against each other. So when everything's competitive, it makes it so much more exciting. It's going to be must-see TV without a doubt. But I think that wraps everything up unless there's anything you guys wanted to touch on. I don't think there would be. I think we pretty much covered everything. We were talking about Presley Harvin earlier. So I think we've kind of covered our bases. But yeah, that's going to do it. If you guys want to plug anything, Tree, not that you really need it, but by all means.
I'm on Urinating Tree on YouTube, Urinating Tree on Twitter for as long as it's around, since it seems like it's going down the tubes. Urinating_Tree on Instagram, and look forward to seeing what the Steelers do football season. It's going to be a very intriguing season.
Yeah. UrinatingTree, it was also nice meeting you, by the way. But you guys can find me at Hail Mary Sports on YouTube, Hail Mary Sports on Twitter, and then, God forbid, Hail Mary Sports on TikTok. Don't.
Oh.
I know.
That's where I got my start. I can't stand for the slander.
I know. I'm doing it. I'm creating the decks right now. It's going to be it's losing the pride, but you know what? It's okay. It's all out of love. It's all out of love.
It's for the brand.
For the brand.
For the brand, dealing with the incredibly inconsistent and unforgiving algorithm on TikTok.
Yes.
But yeah, like I said, that's going to do it for this episode of the Team Preview Series. Make sure to check these two out. All of their links will be in the description down below, as well as all of my links. Make sure to check out my podcast, Run the North. We post every Friday. And then, of course, you can find me on Twitter at MillerFootball_, like Tree said, if that's still around. Don't know where that's going to be at a week from today or by the time this even gets uploaded. On Instagram, MillerFootball__, because apparently there was someone else with MillerFootball_ there. And then, of course, on TikTok at MillerFootball_. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And to everyone out there watching, as well as the two gentlemen sitting here before me, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.